Hello and welcome. My name is Sahan Shalabi and I'm a Solutions Engineer for Cisco Secure Connect. In this video we're going to be reviewing implementing a web policy. Quick review of web policies in the Secure Web Gateway. It's a cloud-based full proxy which has the capability of logging and inspecting all web traffic. It provides IT administrators with greater transparency, control and protection over their users and their web requests. We can also enable HTTPS inspection to start decrypting our users' web traffic, to start scanning for any malicious files with file analysis. Best practices dictate that we should use web policies for content filtering purposes, and this is part in part due to the way that we have additional granular web controls within the policies. I want to spend a few minutes looking at policy structure. There's a lot of information on this slide, but we're just going to be focusing on the first two columns between rule sets and rule set rules. The rule sets are essentially the web policies. The identities that we match to these rule sets is essentially the policy that's going to be used for the user and their requests. The identities could be something like individual users or groups of users, the roaming computer identity when you install the Umbrella Roaming Security module, or a tunnel that is going into Secure Connect. For the scope of this video, we're just going to be focusing on the individuals and groups of users. When a request does come in from, say, one of those users, that request is only going to be processed against the first matching rule set. Rule sets are going to be processed top-down, and within any given rule set, you can create many rule set rules. The rule set rules are what's taking action when users are browsing to a website, for example. This is where we set the action of either allowing, warning, or blocking a user. For the scope of this video, we'll just be looking at the allow and block action, and there is going to be a separate video recorded for the warn action. Within the rule set rules, you can then once again specify identities. If you wanted a rule set rule to just be applied to all users within the rule set, you can simply inherit the rule set identities, and we'll take a look at how you'll do that. Or alternatively, if you wanted to be a bit more granular, you can select from individual identities who are already scoped in the rule set. In terms of where users are sending requests to, the destinations are going to be a part of one of these three settings. The application settings allow us to block for groups of applications or individual applications. The content categories can be used to block against swaths of websites, for instance, social networking sites. And the destination lists can be used to block against very targeted domains or URLs. Before we go over the rule set settings, I wanted to go through an example of how identities and rule sets and rule set rules all play with one another. Say for instance we have user John Hancock over here. John has opened up Secure Client and formed a tunnel into Secure Connect, and for simplicity's sake we'll assume that this is a full tunnel. John then tries to browse to facebook.com. The request goes down the tunnel and is processed against the first rule set that includes his identity. This is going to be rule set 1, which has a rule to block John from Facebook, and as a result, the traffic is dropped. John isn't so easily deterred. He then tries to browse to instagram.com, where the request comes in and is once again processed against rule set 1. There isn't a block rule in rule set 1 to prevent John from accessing instagram.com. As we're only processing against the first matching identity rule set 2 is never going to be processed and the request is going to be allowed through. If we wanted to amend this to block John from both Facebook and Instagram, we can either include both Facebook and Instagram in the same rule, or you could have individual rule set rules to block Facebook and Instagram separately. You may start to expand the scope to all of your users and groups across the organization, and then you can start to be more granular, for instance, allowing marketing users to the social network category while blocking all other users. Back to this slide, I wanted to talk about the rule set settings. These are additional settings which are going to be applied to all identities which are a part of the rule set. We'll take a look at some of these additional settings in an example we've got coming up in just a bit. There's a default web policy in place when you initially provision Secure Connect. This policy is going to be scoped to all identities, meaning regardless of where the request came in, this policy can be used as a catch-all statement and is typically used as the baseline level of security for your organization. The default settings ship with file analysis enabled but sandboxing disabled, file type control, HTTPS inspection both disabled, logging enabled for all requests that come in, and security settings blocking against malware, command and control callbacks, and phishing attacks. Once you've built your web policy, you may want to try to test it. There are a few test destinations provided by Umbrella, so we're able to test these components safely. In addition to the destinations, there are files that you can use in order to trigger certain events like file analysis. So let's take a look at an example of building a web policy. I might have a requirement to start blocking against certain categories like social networking. I may also want to protect our users against known malicious files, as well as submit any unknown files to a sandbox. In addition, I don't want my users to be able to download any executables. We also want to enable HTTPS inspection, partly to have advanced malware protection services be applied to any encrypted traffic, but we may also want to set this up for a data loss prevention policy that we build down the line. Please note that the Umbrella root certificate is required in order to decrypt and re-encrypt the traffic. The installation of this root certificate is covered in the Cisco Secure Client installation video. So let's take a look at how we would configure this policy. I'm currently sitting on the Secure Connect Policies overview page, where I get an overview of all the different security services that I can use with Secure Connect. For the time being though, I'm just going to select Configure Web Policies, and this is going to cross-launch me over to the Umbrella dashboard. Now that the page is loaded, I'll be met with a list of all of my different web policies. If you're setting this up for the first time, you should expect to only see the default web policy listed at the bottom here. I'll go over here to add a new policy. The very first thing that we're going to notice is that the rule set is currently disabled, and this is because I haven't scoped any identities to this rule set yet, so I'll go ahead and do that. In my test case, I'm going to be connected to the remote access VPN as a service. When users connect this way, we challenge them for SAML authentication, so we're able to pick up the identity and apply policies to it. The next thing I'm going to do is start to block the social networking category, so I'll come over here to my rule set rules, add a rule, give it a name of block social networking, leave the rule action as block, and then start to scope my users to this rule. I could dive back into the users section and then select from my individual identity, or I could select inherit rule set identities if I wanted this individual rule to be applied to all of the users in the rule set identities section. For the destinations, I'll go ahead and add a destination, go to the content category section, and scroll down until I get to social networking. I'm going to leave the rule configuration as is and go ahead and save this. We'll see that this is currently grayed out at the moment. In order to actually have the rule enabled, I'll have to select the ellipses on the far right hand side and then enable the rule. You might do this in a migration window where you need to create many rules, and then in a cutover window, mass enable all of them. Further down in the rule set settings, we also wanted to ensure that we were protecting our users against malicious files, as well as submitting any unknown files into a sandbox environment. By default, file analysis is enabled, but in order to have unknown files submitted into a sandbox environment, I need to select the slider window to enable secure malware analytics. If you're doing this for the first time, you'll need to select the sandbox region, and this cannot be changed after your selection. Please select the region that corresponds best with any data regulations or data laws that you have to adhere to. I also wanted to enable file type control to prevent my users from downloading any executables. At the top left, I could search for any file extensions if I wanted to block for them specifically, but in this case, I'm simply going to select the executables group. Last thing I wanted to do was enable HTTPS inspection, which is currently disabled, so I'll go ahead and edit this. I get a pop-up window with a couple of options to select from. In this case, I'm going to enable HTTPS inspection. Now, I may not want to decrypt all of my traffic. In order to specify any exceptions for HTTPS inspection, I have a drop-down that I can select which includes the default web selective decryption list. This is essentially a component that can contain either categories, applications, or domains that I don't want to have decrypted. I'm going to go ahead and save this at the moment, and we can see that this is currently empty. I'm going to then go on over to the policies section, and then under the policy component, go to selective decryption list. We see the list over here, which I'm going to expand, and I'm going to add a couple of categories that I don't want to decrypt for. For instance, finance and banking websites, as well as health and medicine websites. I'll go ahead and save this. Now, when I go back to my web policy and expand the rule sets that we were working in, I'll also edit the HTTPS inspection section, and we can start to see that the component which has now been updated is also including the health and medicine as well as finance categories to avoid for decryption. Now, I still haven't enabled the rule yet, which is fine. I want to do some testing beforehand to ensure that the policy is working as expected. The very first thing I'm going to do is open an additional window, go to Google and search for Cisco Umbrella Policy Debug. The very first link at the top for policy-debug.checkumbrella.com is the one I'm looking for. And if I go to this, we'll see that I'm currently protected by Cisco Umbrella Swig, which is also utilized by Secure Connect. In addition, I'm going to try to browse to a website which should be blocked after we enable this policy. We can see that facebook.com is loading as expected. So we'll come back over here and enable the policy. Now that the rule has been enabled, it will take about a minute or so for this to propagate throughout the cloud infrastructure, but there is a policy tester built directly into the dashboards. In order to do this test, I'll first need to enter my primary identity. In the case of the VPN as a service, the primary identity is going to be the remote access tunnel. The secondary identity is going to be my user account. That's a part of that web policy we created. And then for the destination, I'm going to enter in facebook.com. And as expected, now that we enabled the rule within the rule sets, we should see facebook.com blocked. I'll go ahead and open up another incognito window, try to browse to facebook.com, and we can see that we're getting the block page as we expected. Please note that in order to see the block page, the Umbrella root certificate must be installed on the end user's device. If it isn't installed, you'll just get a browser-generated error, which will say something to the effect of there being an issue with the certificate. That's all for this video. Thank you very much for joining, and all the best. Take care.